The first Bitcoin reserve law has just been confirmed in the USA, and now up to 10% of the states here could flow into Bitcoin. It is the first state here in the USA where both the Senate and the House of Representatives have approved the Bitcoin law. And we've had a lot of back and forth for a long time. And then it went through some instances, and then it was rejected, or it went through again. And Arizona is now in the pole position here. But beware, this doesn't mean that this law is active and already in effect, because there's still Governor Hobbs, who could nullify the whole thing. Now let's take a look at how high the probabilities are that this law will be activated. At the same time, we see significant purchases from BlackRock, who are massively buying Bitcoin again. And today we might see the first Bitcoin Prime Minister in Canada, Pierre Poilievre, who is, yes, up for election. And we have a super exciting statement from Anthony Pompliano about Bitcoin here on Fox TV. And the whole topic of strategic Bitcoin reserves is highly explosive because we have the issue that Donald Trump made the executive order, and that is then implemented at the state level. But there are still all the states in the USA. The USA is known for its decentralization. Also something. There was often the debate that perhaps the states would buy Bitcoin first before the USA, as a whole country buys Bitcoin. That was the take that, for example, Dennis Porter always made. And it even looks like this might actually come true now. But as I said, there's a small catch to the whole story that we'll look at in a moment. Let's first take a look at the ETFs. We see here that BlackRock has bought over 10,000 Bitcoin again, which is, of course, significant. However, we have to say on the other hand that there were also slight outflows, for example with ARK and so on. That means it looks very, very good for BlackRock right now. I recently reported on this as well. Recently, I believe they bought 13,000 or 14,000 Bitcoin or something like that. So, BlackRock's clients are really making significant purchases again. So it's not BlackRock directly buying Bitcoin, but rather BlackRock's clients buying Bitcoin. And BlackRock manages the money for the clients. And then we have the second story here in the USA. Yes, no one you could today, in nationwide elections, elect its first pro-Bitcoin prime minister. Pierre Poilievre owns Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation and would make Canada the crypto capital of the world. So he could also get ahead of Donald Trump here. But to be honest, Pierre Poilievre doesn't have terrible approval ratings, but according to current projections, he's still quite a bit short, 10% or something like that, for him to win the election here. Therefore, it's not entirely certain if this will go through. But Pierre Poilievre already made statements about Bitcoin 3 or 4 years ago or so. He's chilling in the shisha bar and talking about Bitcoin inflation. There were also various scenes where he simply explained the problem of inflation to different politicians in the USA. He has also not really done it now in the election campaign. Contributed. But, before he was nominated as president here, he was very, very active in politics, pushing Bitcoin forward. It would be intense, of course, if he were to become prime minister. Canada is now also very, very socialist. I know a lot of people here who have fled to El Salvador from Canada because they say it's unbearable there. There's a little update here now. It looks like Poilievre has lost here. The Bitcoin historian is already writing here. Canada officially has a central banker as prime minister. That was the opposing candidate here. On one side stood a central banker, a former central banker. And on the other side, yes, a Bitcoin fanatic was up for election, and the central banker won. Max Kaiser is also posting here about how it must feel to be in Canada right now. You're chilling in your garden, and there's a burning house in the background. And yes, that's perhaps how one could describe central bank policy or socialism here. But what we're looking at now is the most important thing currently and the main topic at the moment. We see here, with 31 to 25 votes, it's being passed in Arizona. The Bitcoin law, so yes, relatively close here, but with a slight lead. And it's now very, very interesting because when you make such a law, it has to go through several instances. It has to go through the Senate. It has to go through the House of Representatives. And at the very end, it also has to be signed by the governor of the state here. It's now very, very interesting that it has made it through all the instances. And now let's take a detailed look at what exactly this means. Because in the event of a signing, Arizona would be the first U.S. state to officially invest public funds in Bitcoin for the state and pension systems. It would then be possible to invest up to 10% of public funds in virtual currencies like Bitcoin. We need to know that Arizona currently manages around 31 billion or something like 30 billion, so they could invest nearly 3 billion here. To be honest, that wouldn't be such a huge sum, like a micro-strategy. They just recently almost exhausted the 21 to 21 program, now almost exhausted. They put 21 billion into Bitcoin, and here it would be 3 billion. But the important thing here is the symbolic impact. And there are also much bigger players in the USA. There are also larger states that could inject even more money. And it's a catalyst effect. That means one state starts. And even if it's only 100 million or just 10 million or so, it's complete. Also, no matter. Because it's really about the symbolic impact and what it could trigger. Because it forces Donald Trump to become more active here. It forces other states to become more active. And the whole thing could be a huge catalyst, even if it's maybe only 3 billion. Although 3 billion is not nothing either. It further states here that the bill also provides for the storage of these assets in a secure, separate account, possibly within a strategic federal Bitcoin reserve, if one is established. And now it gets interesting. In the event of a veto, the Arizona legislature could attempt to override the veto. However, this requires a 2/3 majority in both chambers, which could be difficult, given the partisan divisions. Alternatively, supporters could revise similar bills and reintroduce them in future sessions. If no action is taken, if the governor does not act within 5 days, excluding Sunday, after receiving the bill, if no action is taken, it automatically becomes law. So, we have the governor or Governor Hobbs here, and she could just veto it. If she does nothing, then it takes effect in 5 days, or she could simply sign it. And if that doesn't happen, then you basically have to go through the whole process again. Or you would need a large majority, which is very, very unlikely. And the big problem, the major catch here is that the whole thing could potentially be stopped by the Democrats now, because Governor Hobbs is actually a Democratic politician. And we already know from the past that the Democrats were often the ones who manipulated and stopped the whole Bitcoin story here. Even if we look at the last government, the 2 administrations, all of them, yes, including Elizabeth Warren and Janet Yellen, and all of them, they're all Democrats. And they are, of course, not often set up in a libertarian way. There was also a very, very interesting assessment here from, yes, Marty in the X, who explains what it would mean if Governor Hobbs does not accept this. And it was said here, Governor Katie Hobbs has not explicitly stated whether she will sign SB 1373, which is the bill, or veto it. However, several factors indicate a high likelihood of a veto. The current veto stance is that Governor Hobbs announced on April 17, 2025, a moratorium on bills, and announced that she would block all bills until the legislature decides on funding the Department of Developmental Disabilities, which supports nearly 60,000 residents of Arizona since the 28th. As of April 2025, this stalemate continues, and just in the past week, she has rejected 15 bills, including some she would otherwise support. This suggests that SB 1373 is facing a veto, unless the issue of funding for disability support is resolved. And that's just a very, very big problem, that even though she might actually like it, she still vetoes it if the current legislation is simply being blocked, if one just says out of protest or something that all laws are being rejected. And that's really unfortunate here if it doesn't go through. I mean, there are other states that are already very, very advanced in this area. In the legislation, which is now also on the verge of a vote here from the governor, where perhaps even Republican governors are involved. I also saw somewhere in the comments someone asked, Croc, what is the likelihood that the law will pass? And then the probability came up, 10%. Is this still bad for Bitcoin? I would say no. It's still generally a good thing that you can see it's being presented very, very far democratically. The only thing is that in the end, it might be nullified. That's just, maybe also, I don't know, I can't assess whether that's a good reform to make laws this way or not a good way to make laws. But somehow I find it a bit strange. First, you make such democratic decisions, and in the end, it can be cut down by one person again. Although you also have to say, the person might also be partially democratically elected. I'm not really familiar with it, 100%, but in any case, I find it somewhat strange. What you can also take away from this, which is also very, very important, is that even if it is rejected, you can clearly see that the topic is being pushed forward here. And if it doesn't pass in Arizona, then the likelihood is very, very high that it will pass in other states this year. Not Porter Robinson, but Dennis Porter says that definitely this year some state will establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And yes, we need to keep watching how this all develops. We now have a very, very interesting statement from Anthony Pompliano here on Fox TV about Bitcoin.
If you look at what's happened so far since Liberation Day, Bitcoin has been the best performing asset so far. And I think that when you have uncertainty, when you have exuberance in a market, people are looking for what is the asset that is going to be most sensitive. They want to express the view.
Didn't gold do better than Bitcoin?
Gold has done better over year to date, but not since Liberation Day. And I think an important part of this is when people are looking for a directional bet, they want the thing that is most sensitive, the thing that will move the most. And Bitcoin definitely does that. Now, the nice thing about Bitcoin and gold is they tend to move in the same direction at the same time. So if gold is going up, Bitcoin is going up, Bitcoin just happens to go up more. Same happens on the downside as well. And so what I think we're really headed here is we're going to get 1 to 2 interest rate cuts through the end of the summer. I think you're going to start to see some trade deals get announced, some positive news come out of DC. Investors are going to have amnesia. They're going to forget that they were worried a couple weeks ago. They're going to start to put capital back into these markets. And Bitcoin usually is kind of the fastest horse. It's the most sensitive to that capital being put back into the market. And I think it'll push us back over an all-time high.
It is the most sensitive to the capital we can put into the market. And I think it will pull us back above the daily level. And that's why it's said here that Bitcoin is especially important when there is real uncertainty. If there is slight uncertainty, then not. But when there is real uncertainty. That was also the case when there was the invasion of Ukraine. That was also the case when Signature Bank exploded, and so on. That means there have been times like this, situations or Bitcoin has really served as a risk-off asset, and at the moment, it might also look a bit like that. At least, these are the hints from Anthony Pompliano. However, one must also say that Bitcoin hasn't skyrocketed to the ultimate high. It has only performed okay and has also been dragged down, one must say, but perhaps not as severely as the stock market. He also says that he definitely expects new all-time highs because the capital will flow back. And if that happens, Bitcoin will rise more than gold. That means gold will also rise, but Bitcoin will rise more strongly. We always see the correlation that when gold goes down, Bitcoin usually goes down more, especially in crisis situations. When gold rises, then Bitcoin also rises much more. That means we have something like a prime mover effect on Bitcoin, and we have often seen that gold leads the way, and then Bitcoin follows. And the gold rally, we've had that going on for quite a long time now, and now it would be time for Bitcoin to break out. And that's also QSY in bed, and it's just very, very interesting to hear. And yes, you can feel free to let me know below. Share your assessments on whether you agree with the assessment. Also, tell me what you think about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Do you think it's good that states are pushing this forward? That states are getting involved in Bitcoin at all? And if you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link below for you. 21 Bitcoin, how you can buy Bitcoin easily, safely, and simply. With the code Bitcoin, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. It's absolutely easy, safe, and simple. For beginners, advanced users, and professionals, definitely check it out. Guys, see you. Peace out.